Guys, let's get started. Updating you on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some altcoins. Here's the situation with Bitcoin. It swept the internal liquidity, okay? And it mitigated an order block. In fact, I shared with you all in the community, right? The possibility of taking a buy in that order block around the 103,800 region. There was also an order block here, but it's a weaker order block, one that didn't sweep liquidity. In the case of this order block, it did sweep liquidity here, see? It's a complex setup, okay? It's a complex setup because Bitcoin left a lot of liquidity in this region between 100 and 2,000 and 100,000, all right? There's a lot of liquidity here. We can see a trend line, right? So Bitcoin is, yeah, within a complex range, but the price should make, okay, an impulsive move from this order block. Of course, Bitcoin can come back here, right? Accumulate within the order block to make the move, okay? But this order block, right, is meant to hold the price. If that doesn't happen, right, considering that the price swept liquidity from this move, right, from this accumulation, and also swept liquidity, right, from this low where the price broke, right, the structure, and didn't sweep liquidity. When that happens, it's liquidity. So what happens then? Since just below this order block, there's actually an area with a particularly high concentration of liquidity. If the price doesn't manage to hold above this block, and this block ultimately fails, the market will likely want to sweep that liquidity, right? And if that happens, we could see, right, the price of Bitcoin come down to visit this block, which is between 97,700 and 95,700. So we would also have, buying opportunity here in this region. I could set up position here with a stop loss below the block and a take profit up at the top, okay? If the price doesn't hold this position where you could also, set up a long position, right? But I share this position within the community, okay? I share this setup within the community. Now, on the short side, what could happen here, right? If we want to look for a shorting opportunity, Bitcoin swept the liquidity from this top, okay? It's internal liquidity, okay? And it broke the structure, all right? This structure is also internal. So we could see this setup better here on the 15-minute chart, on the 1-hour chart, okay? Yeah, this type of setup, when it's internal, is a bit riskier, right? But yes, it would be possible to trade this structure, meaning the market swept liquidity, broke the structure, and left internal liquidity, okay? On that little top. So it would be possible to set up a short position here, all right? It would be a short setup and, yeah, high risk. Taking into consideration that if this order block is respected, the price's objective is to sweep the liquidity that was left here at these lows, okay? So if this order block gets broken, the price will certainly set a new ATH, all right? So we have the possibility to set up the position at 103,800 where it was established. There's the possibility of taking this short, okay? But taking this short, it's a high risk short. So you would need to use a smaller position size, just like, this long here is also one where you should enter with a slightly smaller exposure. Why? Because there's a downside, which is the liquidity below the order block. When we have liquidity below the order block, it's a bit tricky to trade, okay? So personally, I usually trade with a smaller position size because I know there's a chance the price could come down and sweep that liquidity. So this position is risky, but the price has already swept liquidity here and swept liquidity from this low. So it's possible to build a position. The thing is, there's liquidity below the lows. So you really need to pay close attention, okay? It has to be a position with smaller exposure. But it's looking interesting, right? The Ethereum, let's go. Let's look at Ethereum on the 2-hour chart because Ethereum has barely moved, okay? It's really slow. The Ethereum is as follows. The Ethereum, it swept liquidity and managed to break the structure. This break of structure was also a liquidity sweep because we had right here a double top, okay? We had a double top here. The market went up there, broke the structure and swept liquidity, all right? The heat map also it confirmed for us here a high concentration of liquidity. With the price breaking this structure, it confirmed for us, right, that this bottom is a strong bottom. The purpose of a strong bottom is to support, an upward movement. So to take a long position in Bitcoin within this accumulation range, what do we need to wait for? We need to wait for the price to come and sweep this liquidity, okay? This internal liquidity. So it would be possible to set up an extremely risky position, okay? Right here in this order block. Yeah, this order block is between 2,400 and 2,350, okay? It's an extremely risky position because the market has already swept liquidity at the top, okay? And also, right, we would be trading in a premium zone considering the daily range, which is from this bottom to this top. So the market is above 50% of the fib, so it's a premium zone. It's an area where we should be looking for short setups, and we will look at the possibility of taking those setups. But for us to take short setups here, we need Ethereum to change its character, you know? And Ethereum's strong bottom is here in the 2300 region. So for us to have a changing character, the price needs to break through the strong bottom, right? For us to have a true changing character. So that would be the setup, okay? So we can get some shorts. So what happens? We had a BC here. What is a BC? It's a shock, yeah. After a liquidity sweep move, after a bossa here, at the end of an impulse, okay? So this shock shows us that the bullish structure, right, that the upward impulse might be coming to an end so that a correction of the entire impulsive move can come, right? So Ethereum is sitting with some liquidity up here above these highs, right? The market is generating this liquidity. So it's possible for the price to make a liquidity grab, move to sweep this internal liquidity, mitigate this order block that was left after capturing this double top, and then the market could make its move, okay? Yeah, there could also be a shorting opportunity here. There could be a shorting opportunity here as well. Just set the stop loss a little higher. And your take profit, if this short move happens before the long move, then your stop loss should be here at the order block, right? Now, if the price comes to mitigate this order block, then we'll have to look at how the impulsive move is developing, okay? If there's a lot of volume, then we disregard the short. So in this scenario, we can take a long position with greater confidence, okay? What we would need is, for Bitcoin, or rather, more specifically, Ethereum to sweep these lows right here. Because if we even consider Wyckoff's theory, we would be within what's known as an accumulation phase, right? So the price might actually manipulate below this accumulation for us to build a position. But if that happens, I'll update the community, okay? I'm not going to talk about that scenario right now because it's still a long way from happening. Ethereum is at 2,500, okay? For us to have that setup below this accumulation here, it would have to be at 2,300. So it's quite far off. I would do a market update within the community if that happens. Ethereum is looking really bad, okay? I'd rather stay out of this. Buy here. Maybe this short would be interesting, all right? Let's go. Ondo. A student asked me to analyze Ondo. I found Ondo quite interesting, okay? Ondo on the daily chart made, right, a change of character. It created a fake boss for us here, right? What does fake boss mean? It's when the market breaks structure without sweeping liquidity, right? Where was the liquidity here? The liquidity was here. Then the price made this corrective move and didn't sweep the liquidity, right? So it broke structure without sweeping liquidity, meaning this low is also liquidity. And in this move, right, what the price did yesterday actually, today it captured this liquidity and mitigated the OT zone. The OT zone for Ondo is between 0.84 and 0.76, okay? It's a scenario where we could see Ondo come down to sweep the liquidity from these two lows here as well and mitigate this daily order block, which is between 0.78 and 0.7. But if you're looking to open swing trade positions, you could already start building a position, okay? Personally, I would wait for the market to sweep liquidity a bit more clearly, Wait for it to sweep a bit more liquidity, mitigate this block here and then make the upward move, okay? It has an interesting structure. It's a nice setup, all right? The heat map also confirms for us that there is, a clear and noticeable concentration of liquidity in this region. But unfortunately, my internet is slow today, so I'm not even going to open the map. So we would have a pretty interesting setup in this wave here. The market could go up from this OT zone, but I also think it could come a bit lower. It will depend a bit on Bitcoin, okay? But Bitcoin's movement was weak, right? Altcoins dropped a lot because Bitcoin's dominance went up, and Bitcoin itself fell a bit. It dropped 1%. Now it's down 0.7, right? Because it's already gone up a little after mitigating that block, but I'd be keeping an eye on the wave, okay? I'd stay alert. XRP also made a pretty interesting move. I shared this setup with the group as well. We managed to catch a buying opportunity with it, and we are already up a few percent, okay? But XRP swept liquidity right below that accumulation where all the retail traders were already anticipating, the buying position, because retail tends to move in advance, right? So they look at this chart pattern here as if it were a pennant that's about to break out upwards, okay? When in reality, they start accumulating buy positions here and set their stop loss below, in this case, below the pennant. With a stop loss set below, institutions can easily manipulate these traders, mitigate the block, and then start the upward movement. So what's interesting for XRP as well is to start the upward movement from this order block, okay? If this order block fails, then we're going to come sweep this liquidity that was left here, okay? This liquidity is very important. Usually the price really seeks out this kind of liquidity, okay? So if this order block fails, we'll come looking for that liquidity. Then it's quite likely that we'll be able to build a position in this order block here, okay? It would be an external order block, a more extreme order block. But let's see how the market will behave. So far, it's interesting. It would be possible to start building a position. DOT is also mitigating an interesting region. It swept some internal liquidity, but we need to keep an eye on Bitcoin, okay? Bitcoin is, in a 4-hour block, an interesting block, but there's a lot of liquidity here, okay? This Bitcoin liquidity, it makes me a bit uneasy about trading in this block, okay? But yeah, you can still build a position, Yeah, you can build a position, but with less exposure. If the block breaks, we'll sweep this liquidity here and set up a safer position, but join the community, okay? Join the free community. If you can, join the VIP group. I'll be updating you there in a clearer way, right? As soon as the market makes its moves, I'll share the opportunities there as well, both in Bitcoin and both in altcoins, right? So that's it, folks.